This is an overview, a short overview of Chapter 2, Choosing an Effective Visual. Within the process of going from data to story, last week we were at the contextual phase. This week we are at the visual phase. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to determine the most effective visual to represent your data. Commonly used visuals fall into two categories, the verbal system and the visual system. Within the verbal system, we have simple text and we have tables. A particular type of table that we will look at is the heat map. The visual system is often used because of faster processing of information by the audience. We will focus on charts within the visual system. Charts are subcategorized into graphs, maps, and diagrams. Our attention will be on graphs, in particular, graphs that are points, lines, bars, and areas. Let's move next. Tables interact with our verbal system. What do we mean by that? It means that we read the data. This is great when you're communicating with a mixed audience, but if you are offering a live presentation, you do not want to use tables because you do not want your audience reading the data. Tables have designs that fade in the background that let the data take center stage. Here is an example here with heavy borders. The data is not center stage. We have light borders, but we also have light data. Here we have minimal borders. The data very much stands out in this third case. An example of a table would be a heat map. A heat map uses color saturation to convey the relative magnitude of the numbers. Here we have a table on the left, and we have color saturation on the same table on the right. This would be our heat map. The heat map makes the process of picking out the tails of the spectrum of data, the lowest numbers and the highest numbers, with quick ease for your audience. We now move next to the visual system to review visuals that are different types of charts. In particular, we will look at graphs. A scatter plot is useful for showing the relationship between two things. It allows us to encode data simultaneously on the x-axis and the y-axis. Here in this example, we have a visual that displays cost per mile by miles driven. Notice it is designed to draw our eyes to where cost per mile is above the average. Here we see that the same visual using color is designed to draw our eye to where cost per mile is not only above average, but is at less than 1,700 miles or greater than 3,300 miles. 1,700 miles, 3,300 miles. A line chart is used to plot continuous data. It works well for data over time, and it implies a connection between the points because the points are physically connected via the line. You may not want to use a line chart for categorical data. It would not make sense. Here we have a single series. Here we have two series, two lines on the same chart. And here we have multiple series. We have 4 lines on the same chart. Now keep in mind that when you're graphing time on the horizontal axis of a line graph, the data plotted must be in consistent intervals. Notice on the x-axis we have January, February, March, April, May, a consistent interval of months. Slope graphs are useful for us when we want to show relative increases and decreases via the slope or direction. Also, a slope graph is helpful for showing the differences across various categories between two data points. Here we have an example of a slope graph with two data points for the years 2014 and 2015. Here we see career development highlighted in color to draw our attention to career development. When dealing with bar charts, we must have a zero baseline. This is where the x-axis crosses the y-axis at 0. Here in this first bar chart, we see the baseline is 34%. In the second chart, we see the baseline is at 0%. There is only a 4.6% difference between now and January the 1st, 2013. That is not easy to see in the first chart, but it is easy to see in the second chart. It is very important to have the context of the entire bar there in order to make an accurate comparison. Also notice for visual effect, the labels on the y-axis have been moved from the right side on the first chart to the left side on the second chart. Remember, we read from left to right. In addition, notice that the labels of the columns on the first chart were above the columns. On the second chart, the labels are within the columns. Another rule of thumb is that you would like for the bars to be wider than the white space between them. That is the case in both of these visuals. Also, the y-axis could be omitted entirely to eliminate redundancy. We really don't need the labels on the y-axis if we're going to put the labels within the columns. Vertical or column charts can be single series, two series, even more, multiple series. But proceed with caution with multiple series because it can become difficult to focus on one data set at a time and pull out insight. Also notice with two or more series, we have a grouping here due to the categories. Therefore, structure your categorization hierarchy to make comparison easy for your audience. With a stacked vertical or stacked column visual, we can compare totals across categories. We can also visualize the subcomponent pieces within a category. In the first visual, we see that comparison is easy, but in the second visual, comparison is not easy. It is hard to compare the subcomponents across the various categories once you go beyond the bottom series. A waterfall is very much related to a stacked vertical chart. It essentially allows you to pull apart the pieces of a stacked bar to focus on one at a time, or to show a starting point, or to show the increases and decreases, or the resulting ending point. But keep in mind, this is one bar that has been split out on a waterfall chart. As with the vertical chart, we can have a single series, two series, multiple series with a horizontal or row chart. It is useful when category names are long. It is structured such that the eyes hit the category name before the actual data. Therefore, before your audience sees the numeric data, they already know the name of the data, the category. Keep in mind that we have eye movement beginning at the upper left, moving to the right, and zigzagging down to the left again, and then back to the right. This makes horizontal charts very easy for your audience to interpret. As with a stacked vertical, with a stacked horizontal, we are making a comparison of totals across categories, and we are visualizing the subcomponent pieces within a category. Here is an example of a stacked horizontal bar chart with 5 categories. As with the vertical stacked chart, the subcomponents of the categories on a horizontal stacked chart can be structured to show absolute values or sum to 100%. In this example, we are using sum to 100%. In summary, we have covered the verbal system and the visual system. Within the verbal system, we have simple text, which just is the display of a single number. We also have tables and a particular table, the heat map, which is just a saturated or color saturated table. Within the visual system, we focused on graphs that are points, lines, bars, and bars. We did not cover area. That is not recommended at this time. The focus is on point, line, and bar.